There's a John Deere tractor sitting in a barn in Iowa that's been running since 1963. 60 years. The farmer who bought it new is gone. His son ran it for decades, and now his grandson fires it up every spring like it's nothing. Meanwhile, the brand new tractor they bought 3 years ago is already in the shop for the fourth time this season, with a repair bill that could buy a used car. So, what the hell happened? How did we go from machines that outlived their owners to equipment that needs a software update just to change the oil? If you want to understand what went wrong with modern manufacturing and why everything feels like it's designed to break, stick around because this story will genuinely make you mad. And hey, if you appreciate someone actually digging into stories like this instead of just reading you press releases, go ahead and subscribe because we're just getting started. Let's go back to the golden age of tractors. We're talking about the 50s and 60s when companies like John Deere, International Harvester, and Alice Chalmers were building machines that were essentially unstoppable. These weren't sophisticated computers on wheels. They were chunks of cast iron and steel with engines you could practically rebuild with a wrench and a hammer. The John Deere 4000 series, the Farmall M, the Alice Chalmers D series, these things were legends. Farmers bought them knowing they'd be handing them down to their kids. And the crazy part? They were right. The engineering philosophy back then was brutally simple. Overbuilt everything. If a part needed to handle 100 horsepower, they'd build it to handle 200. Tolerances were wide, even which meant parts wore slowly and you could fix them without a micrometer and a degree in engineering. The engines were low revving, maybe 1,500 revolutions per minute at full throttle, so they weren't stressed. They sipped fuel compared to how hard they worked. Everything was mechanical. No computers, no sensors, no black boxes. If something broke, you could see it, touch it, and fix it. A fuel pump was a fuel pump. A carburetor was something you could take apart on your kitchen table. Compare that to what's rolling off the line today. Modern tractors are incredible machines, don't get me wrong. They have GPS guidance accurate to the inch, automated everything, climate-controlled cabs that are quieter than your living room, and enough horsepower to pull a house off its foundation. But here's the kicker. They're also incredibly fragile. Not in the obvious ways. The frames are still strong, the tires are still huge. But the systems that make them run, those are ticking time bombs. Emissions controls, electronic fuel injection, computerized transmissions, DEF systems, sensors for every little thing. And when one of those sensors goes bad, the whole machine shuts down. Not limp mode. Dead stop. Farmers have told stories about brand new tractors, six-figure machines, bricked in the middle of planting season because a $20 sensor failed and the computer won't let the engine start without it. You can't just bypass it or rig something up. The software won't allow it. So you call the dealer, wait for a technician, wait for the part, and watch your planting window close while your tractor sits there fully functional. Except the computer says no. It's insane. A machine that could physically do the work just won't because of code, and that's where planned obsolescence comes in. Now, manufacturers will swear up and down they're not designing things to fail, but let's be real. If you're a company that makes money selling new tractors and replacement parts, what's your incentive to build something that lasts 60 years? Every tractor still running from 1963 is a tractor they didn't sell in 2023. Every farmer who can fix his own equipment is a service call they didn't get paid for. The business model has fundamentally shifted. It's not about building a machine so good people brag about it for generations. It's about building a machine sophisticated enough to justify the price tag and dependent enough to guarantee future revenue. The parts aren't made the same either. Why do those old tractors used cast iron for engine blocks, steel gears in the transmissions, simple, robust parts that wore slowly? Modern tractors use lighter materials to improve fuel efficiency and meet regulations. Aluminum, plastic, composites, they're fine when they're new, but they don't age the same way. And when they do fail, you can't just machine a new part at the local shop. It's proprietary. You have to order it from the dealer, and it costs a fortune because there's no competition. The manufacturer owns the whole supply chain. Then there's the right to repair nightmare. This is where things get really dystopian. Farmers have been fixing their own equipment since farming began. It's not a hobby, it's a necessity. When you're 300 miles from the nearest dealer and your combine breaks down in the middle of harvest, you don't have time to wait for a technician. You fix it yourself. But modern manufacturers have locked down their equipment so tight that farmers legally can't repair their own machines. The software is proprietary. The diagnostic tools are proprietary. Even the error codes are secret. John Deere has literally argued in court that farmers don't own their tractors, they license them. You can buy a $400,000 machine and still not have the right to work on it. This has created an entire underground movement. Farmers are hacking their own tractors. They're buying cracked software from Eastern Europe just to diagnose a problem. They're swapping out computerized parts for old mechanical ones when they can. Some are even buying old tractors from the 60s and 70s, completely rebuilding them. Because it's cheaper and more reliable than dealing with new equipment. There are restoration shops now that specialize in taking those old iron dinosaurs and making them better than new with modern paint, rebuilt engines, updated hydraulics, but keeping all the mechanical simplicity that made them great. Let's talk about the cost side of this because it's staggering. A good condition John Deere 4000 series from the 60s, fully restored, might cost you $30,000 to $50,000. A comparable new tractor, and by comparable I mean similar horsepower and capability, starts at $150,000 and goes up fast. And that's just the purchase price. The old tractor? You can fix it yourself. Parts are cheap because they're simple and often interchangeable. You can keep it running for decades with basic maintenance. Into the new one. Every repair is a dealer visit. Oil changes require special tools. Software updates cost money. And God forbid something major breaks after the warranty expires because you're looking at repair bills that rival the cost of a new car. Insurance companies have even noticed this. There are farms running equipment from the 70s that insurers love because the downtime is minimal and the repair costs are predictable. Meanwhile, new equipment is a gamble. Yeah, it's worth more, but it's also more likely to be out of commission. And when it breaks, the costs are wild. Some farmers have started keeping their old tractors specifically as backup for when the new ones inevitably go down. Think about that. They need a 60-year-old machine to bail out the brand new one. Environmental regulations play a huge role in this too. Now, before anyone gets mad, I'm not saying emissions controls are bad. Cleaner air is good. But the way manufacturers have implemented these systems has been a disaster for reliability. Diesel particulate filters, selective catalytic reduction, exhaust gas recirculation. All this stuff adds complexity and failure points. And it's not like they perfected it before rolling it out. Early DEF systems were a nightmare. They'd crystallize, clog, fail in cold weather. Farmers in northern states were finding their tractors wouldn't start in winter because the DEF froze and the system wouldn't let the engine run. A machine that's supposed to work in all conditions, dead because of emissions equipment. And here's the cruel irony. Those old tractors, the ones that last forever, farmers keep them running, which means they're not buying new ones, which means the overall fleet stays older and actually produces more emissions than if reliable new equipment existed that farmers trusted enough to replace the old stuff with. But they don't trust it because it breaks, so they keep the old iron running, and the cycle continues. The cultural shift is real too. Older farmers, the ones who grew up with mechanical equipment, they're comfortable fixing things. They understand how an engine works, how a clutch works, how hydraulics work. They can troubleshoot by sound and feel. Younger farmers growing up with modern equipment, they're learning to be computer technicians instead of mechanics. They're navigating software menus and reading error codes. And when something goes wrong that the computer can't diagnose or won't let them fix, they're stuck. There's a whole skill set disappearing because the equipment doesn't allow for it anymore. Some manufacturers have started to feel the backlash. There's been a small movement towards simpler tractors, basic models without all the electronics, aimed at smaller farms and international markets where serviceability matters more than features. And those are selling. Farmers are actively choosing less sophisticated equipment because it's more reliable and they can actually fix it. That should tell you everything about what's wrong with the flagship models. Then you've got the competition angle, or rather, the lack of it. The tractor industry has consolidated like crazy. All those brands from the 60s, most of them are gone or absorbed into a handful of massive corporations. Less competition means less pressure to build quality into the product. If all the major brands are doing the same thing, locking down repairs, building in planned obsolescence, where's the incentive to change? A company that broke ranks and built truly durable, repairable equipment might win in the long run, but they'd sacrifice short-term profits, and shareholders don't like that. There are bright spots, though. Some smaller manufacturers and startups are trying to build tractors the old way. Simple, mechanical, repairable, tough. They're not going to compete on horsepower or features with the big guys, but for a lot of farmers, that's fine. They don't need GPS and automated steering. They need something that starts every morning and doesn't throw a fault code when a sensor gets dusty. If these companies can survive and grow, they might actually force the industry to change. But it's a long shot. The legacy of those old tractors is more than just machines. It's a philosophy. Build something right, build it to last, and people will respect it. Farmers still talk about their old farmalls and deers with genuine affection. They've got stories about pulling stumps, plowing fields in blizzards, running for days straight during harvest. These machines were partners. They were reliable. You trusted them. Can you say that about a tractor that needs a technician with a laptop to change a setting? That dies because of a software glitch? It's a fundamentally different relationship. What's happening with tractors is happening everywhere. Cars, appliances, electronics, everything is getting more complex, more locked down, less repairable, and we're all poorer for it. Not just financially, though, that's real, but we lose the ability to fix our own stuff, to understand how things work, to have independence. We become dependent on manufacturers and service networks and subscription models. That farmer in Iowa with the 60-year-old tractor, he's got freedom. When it breaks, he fixes it. He's not at anyone's mercy. That's worth something. Maybe worth more than all the fancy features in the world. So how did farmers keep the same tractor running for 60 years while new ones last 3? They bought machines built by people who took pride in durability. They maintained them. They fixed them. They didn't have a choice because the machines allowed it. And now, facing equipment that's designed to fail and impossible to repair, they're fighting back, restoring old iron, hacking new systems, demanding right to repair laws, because they understand something the manufacturers forgot. A tool that lasts is worth 10 that don't. And farmers, more than anyone, know the value of things that endure. This whole situation has created a fascinating generational divide that's worth exploring a bit deeper. You've got these older farmers who are mechanically minded, who grew up understanding their equipment down to the last bolt. And then you've got younger generations who are inheriting this mess of proprietary systems and digital locks. The knowledge gap is becoming a real problem. When your grandfather could teach you how to rebuild a carburetor or replace a fuel pump, that's institutional knowledge passed down through families. But when the tractor won't let you touch anything without voiding the warranty, and the software is locked behind manufacturer agreements, how do you learn? How do you develop the skills and confidence to be self-sufficient? What's particularly frustrating is that this complexity isn't actually necessary for performance. Those old tractors performed their job perfectly well without computers. They weren't slower or less efficient in any meaningful way compared to what farmers actually needed. The added complexity came because manufacturers could add it, because regulations required certain features, and because it created a dependency loop that benefits the companies financially. But from a pure farming perspective, from the actual work being done in the field, a lot of that technology is just overhead. It's complexity for complexity's sake, with the side effect of making machines unreliable and unrepairable. And the warranty situation is another layer of this problem that deserves attention. When you buy something, you own it, right? Or at least, that's what most people think. But modern equipment often comes with terms that basically say, you can use it, but you can't modify it or fix it yourself, even after the warranty expires. If you crack open your tractor's computer to try to diagnose an issue, that might void your warranty. If you replace a part with a non-OEM version, that could void your warranty. And if something goes wrong that the manufacturer claims is due to you doing something wrong, good luck proving otherwise. The power imbalance is enormous. The farmer is trapped between keeping the warranty or maintaining independence. Most can't afford to give up the warranty, so they lose the independence. This has spawned some incredible examples of resistance and creativity. There are YouTube channels dedicated entirely to teaching people how to fix old farm equipment. There are online communities where farmers share tips on identifying and working around manufacturer restrictions. Some have started buying used machinery and completely modifying it, stripping out the electronics and replacing them with mechanical equivalents. It's almost like people are engineering their way back to simplicity because simplicity actually works better. It's a regression, but it's a conscious, intelligent regression born from frustration with systems that don't serve their users. The environmental argument is interesting too because manufacturers often justify the complexity by citing efficiency and emission standards. And yes, the modern engines are cleaner and more fuel efficient when they work properly. But when you factor in the downtime, the failed equipment, the unnecessary replacement of machines that are perfectly capable of doing their jobs, the environmental impact gets murky. A tractor sitting in a shop for 2 weeks waiting for a part is using no fuel, but also not producing anything. A farmer forced to replace a perfectly good machine because repairs have become uneconomical is creating massive waste. The environmental calculus doesn't actually favor all this complexity when you account for the systemic failures it creates. There's also a real economic argument about wealth and inequality hidden in this story. When a farmer could afford to keep equipment running for decades, they could control their costs. They could invest in land, in infrastructure, in growing their operation because they weren't bleeding money on repairs and replacements. But when equipment requires constant, expensive repairs and forced replacement cycles, that's capital being extracted from the farm. It goes to dealers and manufacturers instead of staying in the farming business. Over time, this shifts the power dynamic. Smaller farms can't afford the new equipment, so they get bought out by larger operations. The industry consolidates, and suddenly farming becomes something only large corporations can do profitably because they can absorb the repair costs and the replacement cycles. This is why the right to repair movement has become so important beyond just tractors. It's really about economic independence. It's about whether people can own and control the tools that drive their livelihoods. It's about whether a manufacturer gets to dictate the terms of ownership forever, or whether at some point, when you buy something, you actually get to own it. These aren't just technical questions. They're fundamental questions about property rights and economic freedom. Some states and countries have started taking this seriously. There have been legislative efforts around the world to mandate right to repair provisions. The European Union has been pushing manufacturers toward repairability standards. Some states in the U.S. have introduced bills specifically protecting farmers' rights to repair their own equipment. These laws are contentious because they cut directly against manufacturer business models, but they're gaining traction because the status quo has become obviously broken. What's remarkable is how the farming community has become a testing ground for these issues. Farmers face the problem in its starkest form because downtime literally costs them money during critical periods. But the same principles apply everywhere. Your phone breaks and you can't repair it because it's locked down. Your car has issues, but the dealer wants hundreds of dollars just to run diagnostics. Your appliance fails and it's cheaper to buy a new one than fix the old one. We've all accepted this as normal, but it's not. It's a choice. The manufacturers choose to design things this way because it's profitable, not because it's necessary. The restoration market for old tractors is booming in a way that tells you everything. People aren't just buying these machines as nostalgia pieces. They're buying them as functional equipment because they're genuinely better suited to actual work than brand new alternatives. A farmer will spend 50 grand restoring a 1960s John Deere and then use it as their primary machine because they trust it more than a $200,000 new tractor. That's not sentiment. That's rational economic decision-making. The old machine is cheaper to own and operate, more reliable and more valuable long-term. When the past becomes a better investment than the present, something has gone seriously wrong. And yet, despite all this, manufacturers keep doubling down on the complexity. They keep adding features, most of which farmers don't need or want. They keep locking down the software. They keep fighting right to repair efforts, because short term, it works for them. They sell more new machines. They sell more service contracts. They make more money off replacements and repairs. The question is whether that's sustainable or whether the market is going to eventually force a reckoning. There are signs that pressure is building. Farmer advocacy groups are getting more organized. Right to repair legislation is gaining momentum. Used equipment values are holding strong because people trust the old stuff. Some manufacturers are starting to realize that maybe alienating your customer base isn't a long-term strategy. John Deere, for instance, has had to make some concessions on right to repair after massive backlash. It's a tiny fraction of what farmers are asking for, but it shows that the pressure works. If you think about where this goes, there are a few possible futures. One is that manufacturers continue down this road, equipment becomes increasingly unreliable and expensive, and farmers gradually shift to older equipment or to smaller manufacturers building simpler machines. That would actually be a correction. The old equipment works, so market forces push people toward it. Another future is that right to repair laws actually pass and force manufacturers to open up their systems. That would be better for consumers and probably better for the environment and for the agriculture industry long term. Or the worst case scenario is that we accept the status quo and just normalize this broken system as the price of progress. What the story of that John Deere running for 60 years really tells us is that good engineering is possible, that machines can be built to last, that complexity isn't always better, that sometimes simpler is actually stronger. Those lessons apply to everything we use, everything we own. The question is whether manufacturers will remember them or whether we have to force them to. Based on what's happening now, I'd say we're going to have to force them. Because left to their own devices, companies will always choose the path that maximizes short-term profit, even if it's worse for everyone else. That's not cynicism. That's just understanding how incentives work. So here's the thing. This story started as a question about why old tractors last longer than new ones. But it's really a story about values and choices. It's about whether we design things to endure or design them to fail. Whether we build for the customer or for recurring revenue. Whether we respect ownership or just give people the illusion of it. And it matters because the answer shapes what kind of world we live in. A world where people can own and fix their own tools is fundamentally different from a world where corporations control everything forever.